What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and in today's episode of the third person and action RPG tutorial series, we are going to go over improving our interaction system again. Specifically, we are going to be going over allowing the character, or the player, to interact with items in the world based on the overlap interaction or the look at interaction. We want to support both methods. There are games that support only one method, and there are some that support both, but if we support both, we have the maximum amount of potential. So we're just going to support both, and you can choose if you want to only enable one or the other. So you'll see here that if I face my camera up like this, you'll know that I'm not looking at the weapon. It's very obvious. So any sort of prompt that you get for add basic sword to inventory, or walk over here, add the dagger to the inventory, or add the axe to the inventory, this is all from the overlap. However, if I look at an item, say the dagger, I can say add basic dagger to inventory, or add basic axe to inventory, or add basic sword to inventory, and I'm all the way over here. I'm clearly not overlapping with it. So both systems are working together. This is also going to solve the issue where we get two prompts at the same time when we overlap with two or more items. So you'll see it just says add basic axe to inventory. But there will be other things that we need to solve with this. This episode isn't addressing that, just inherently it is going to help us begin solving that, where we only will have one prompt at a time. Now, if you guys want to get caught up in the series before you check out this episode, I'll link you to the entire playlist right here. You can check out how we've done everything from locking onto enemies, performing attacks, and our equipment. If you only care about the interaction system, then I will link you to the previous episode of the interaction system. With that out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. So this is a code and blueprint tutorial series. Let's start in the code today, and let's go to our third-person tutorial character.cpp. Specifically, we want to update our tick function because we want to support interacting with weapons, equipment, and items, the three things that we've set up in the series so far with interactions. In the previous episode, the Look at to Interact episode, we had only done this for weapons, and that was perfectly fine as an example, but as we go further here, we want to make sure we are accounting for all of our cases. So in the previous episode, we were drawing a line trace, and we were determining if the actor that we hit was a weapon, and if it was, we were setting our current actor that we're interacting with to that weapon, and then triggering the interaction pop-up passing in that actor. If it wasn't a weapon, if this first if statement failed, we were going into an else, where we were resetting the interact actor and hiding the pop-up. However, I've added two new conditions here for today's episode, which are these two else ifs. First thing here, we are going to use our hitResult.getActor, like we did for the weapon, but we are going to cast it to a default equipment. Essentially, is the actor that we're looking at a type of equipment? If it is, we'll set it equal to this variable, interactable equipment, and then we will use it. So again, this first if statement is if it's a weapon. Now we have an else if auto interactable equipment equals cast to a default equipment, passing in our hitResult.getActor. Interact actor gets set to our interactable equipment variable, so we can trigger the interaction pop-up using that actor. Now we have another else if right here. This one's for the item, so auto interactable item equals cast to a default item, passing in the hitResult.getActor. So if the actor we are looking at is a type of default item, or basically just a type of item, then we can set our interact actor equal to the interactable item variable that we made in the else if, and we can call trigger interaction pop-up passing in our actor. So there we go. Now all of our types of interactables can be interacted with using the look at functionality. Once we are in the editor, we can go to our character blueprint. So for me, that's my third person CPP, blueprints, characters, base character BP. Now when we come in here, the first thing we want to do is update our trigger interaction pop-up event. This is the event we made in the previous episode, and all the logic you see on this very top row is what we had done for our look at interaction. This is all still valid, but we want to add the same behavior for our equipment and items as well now. Essentially what's happening is we're determining if there's already a pop-up on the screen. If there is not, we're determining if the item that we were looking at is a base weapon BP, or essentially a weapon. If it is, we spawn a new equip item prompt widget we call set correct item details, which sets the proper name in that prompt. So as you see when I go over an item in here, it says add basic sword to inventory. That basic sword is coming from the details of the actor. We add it to the viewport so that the player can see it, and then we set the equip pop-up ref to the widget we created. Now, if the cast fails to a base weapon BP, that means the actor we're looking at is not a weapon. So we want to do another cast instead. So I drag off my interactable actor, cast to equipment, base equipment BP. And I'm going to do the same thing, essentially. We are going to create an equip item prompt widget. And the way you do this is just create widget. And select equip item prompt, which we made earlier in the series. Then we're going to drag off of our base equipment BP and search for set correct item details. And we're going to pass in the return value of the create widget to the widget reference. Then we're going to drag off of the widget again to add it to the viewport. And lastly, we are going to set our equip pop-up ref variable that we made in the previous episode equal to that widget as well. And when you do all that, you get what you see here. We're going to do this one more time, but we're going to do it for items. So we're going to drag off of our interactable actor, cast to base item BP. Get this node, and then we're going to create our widget. We're going to drag off of this to call set correct item details. We're going to add it to the viewport, and then we're going to set equip pop-up ref. So now our look at function will work properly for all of our different interactables. Let's scroll down now to our hide interaction pop-up. Now in the previous episode, this is what would happen when we looked away. We were looking at anything that wasn't a weapon. So if we looked away from the weapon, we would hide the pop-up by checking to see if a pop-up existed, and if it did, we would remove it from the parent, meaning we would remove it from the viewport, so it would get removed off the player's screen, and then we would reset this variable back to null or empty. That way we know there's not a pop-up on the screen currently. Since we're going to be supporting look at and overlap in the same system, we do need to know if we're overlapping an item, because if we look away from the item, say we're no longer looking at a base weapon, but we are still overlapping with one, then we still want a prompt to be displayed. We don't want to hide it because of that. It's going to get a little bit more intense than this in future episodes when it comes to that sort of interaction between the look at and the overlap, but for now, all we want to do is make sure we don't hide it, because we still want that widget to be displayed to the screen. So we're going to add an is overlapping item check to the start of this event. This is a variable that we made in the character class a long time ago for our interaction system. So we can check is overlapping item, get that, bring it into a branch. And only if it's false, we're not overlapping with the item, do we want to go into the rest of the logic that we filled out in the previous episode. Now, that is good for our look at interactions. We need to handle the overlap interactions as well. So I've added mine down lower, right here. And it's going to be on component begin overlap with our capsule component. So when we go to our character, we have our colliders. My capsule component is my default collider for my character. If I go to the details of the capsule component, I can scroll down to the bottom and I will see all these events. We want to press the plus next to on component begin overlap. So basically, when this capsule component starts overlapping with objects in the world, this event will get called. So once you press the plus button, it will bring you to this event right here. And we're basically going to do the same checks we just did for the look at. Only difference is we're going to set our is overlapping item in the process. We're going to grab the other actor. This is the actor that we collided with. So we're going to start off the same way. We want to make sure before doing this that we don't already have a widget on the screen to display what item to interact with. So we get our equip pop-up ref, and we can right click and convert that to a validated get. Only if it's not valid at the current time, meaning we don't have one on the screen, do we want to proceed into any of this logic. Then we're going to drag off of the other actor. This is the actor that the capsule component is colliding with. So it can be colliding with, for example, a weapon, a base weapon BP. So other actor, cast to base weapon BP. If this cast succeeds, that means we are in fact overlapping with an item. So unlike with the look at interaction, we do need to set a variable here. So set is overlapping item. And we want to check that box to say we are overlapping this item. From here, it's the same as the look at. We want to create our widget. We want to drag off of the base weapon BP and set the correct item details, passing in the widget. We want to add the widget to the viewport, and we want to set the widget as the equip pop-up ref. If the cast fails, then we check to see if the other actor is a type of base equipment BP. Again, if it is, we're going to say we are overlapping an item. Then we're going to create the equip item prompt widget. We're going to call set correct item details on the base equipment BP, passing in the widget, add it to the viewport, and set the reference. If the cast fails to the equipment, we're going to check to see if we're overlapping a base item BP, and if we are, we're going to set is overlapping item to be true. We're going to create the equip item prompt widget. We're going to call set correct item details on the base item BP, passing in the widget as a reference. We're going to call add to viewport on the widget, and we're going to set the widget to the reference. Now that is all we need for our onComponent begin overlap. We also need to fill out our onComponent end overlap. So if we go back to our capsule component details, scroll down to the bottom with the events, we can add the onComponent end overlap. In here, we basically just need to determine if we stopped overlapping with a weapon, piece of equipment, or an item. If we did, we can hide the widget. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this is going to get a little bit more complicated. Really what we need to check is if we stopped overlapping with the actor for the widget we're currently displaying the equip prompt for. But that's coming in the next interaction episode, and that will be explained in there. So for now, we just need to see if we stopped overlapping with any of our possible interactables. So we drag off the other actor, the actor that we are no longer overlapping with, using the capsule component, and we're going to cast it to our base weapon BP. If that cast succeeds, we proceed, but if it fails, we want to also check our base equipment BP. If that succeeds, we proceed, but if it fails, we want to also check our base item BP. Now, if that succeeds, we also proceed. So we have 3 possible chances to proceed here. But if all these casts fail, then we won't do anything with the reference. Now, once we determine that we have ended overlap with our weapon, equipment, or item, we want to make sure that our equip pop-up reference is valid. If it is valid, we can go ahead and remove it from the parent right now. This will stop the player from being able to see it on their viewport. Once we do that, we want to reset the equip pop-up ref. To do that, we can just drag the equip pop-up ref and set it, and don't plug anything into it. It'll just be empty. Lastly, we want to say we are no longer overlapping an item, so we can just set is overlapping item and leave it false. That is all of our interaction logic that we need to do. Now, the only other thing we want to do is stop the interaction logic from firing in each of the classes. We're doing this all in our base character BP class now on purpose. Before, we were doing it in the base weapon, base equipment, and base item classes. We want to go back to those classes, but now take those things out. So I'm going to go to my weapons, base weapon BP, and find where I had my onComponent begin overlap and onComponent end overlap. In here, I disabled them, specifically for the interaction box. The interaction box is the one that we can actually interact or equip that item or interactable when we're within this range. We have different boxes like our damage collider. We don't want to do this logic for the damage collider. We only want to do it for the interaction box. So find your overlaps for your interaction box and disable them, disconnect it like I did, or you can actually delete them. You'll notice it's really the same logic that we have in the character now. We just don't want to be doing it twice, and we want the character to be handling that behavior. So we can delete everything in there if you want and clean up the graph. That's for the base weapon BP. Unless you're doing anything specific in the child classes, you won't need to go into them. We did not throughout the series, so that should not be an issue. We need to go back and go to our equipment and our base equipment BP. and you'll see I've disabled them in here as well, the begin overlap for the interaction box and the end overlap for the interaction box. Again, we can just remove them. We don't need that behavior anymore. Lastly, we want to go to our items, so we're going to go back to items and base item BP, and I've disabled my begin overlap and end overlap for my interaction box. Now we can go ahead and just remove that logic and clean it up. File and save. Now, all of our logic is correct for our code and all of our blueprints. We need to update our collisions for the equipment and the items to match what we did for the weapon in the previous episode. So in our base weapon BP, we had updated our interaction box's collision for our lookout function. So collision preset before was overlap all dynamic, but I'm actually switching it to custom so that the visibility channel can be block. This is how it allows us to look at it and then actually determine that we are looking at it so we can interact with it without overlapping with it. We did this in the previous episode, but we want to do this for our equipment and item, which we did not do in the previous episode. So base equipment BP, go to the interaction box, scroll down to your collision, go to collision presets, change it from overlap all dynamic to custom. Everything can be overlap except for visibility. Make sure that is on block. Lastly, go to base item BP, go to your interaction box, scroll down to collision, change overlap all dynamic to custom, and then everything can be overlap except the visibility, which should be block. At that point, you are good to go. If you enjoyed this episode and it helped you improve your interaction system, then please subscribe. It does more for the channel than anything else you can do, and I just really appreciate it. If you'd like to support me further, you can go ahead and check out the Patreon, YouTube membership, and Discord subscriptions, like all these kind souls listed on the screen have, as well as check out all the benefits you get for doing so. Thanks again for everything, guys. If you had any issues with this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. There is a link in the description, and that support is completely free. But anyway, guys, that's all I got, so thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.